The Sound of Damian Wayne. Written by Magnoliabee. Read to you by Evie is Evil. Chapter 11. You have to tell me, dude! Damian stared ahead as Cody continued to whine behind him. His voice was grating on his ears, spit spraying from his mouth with each word. He could feel it on his neck, a disgusting sensation that made him want to turn around and throw his notebook at Cody. But it would be an act of little reward, so he merely grit his teeth as he continued ignoring the barrage of questions being hurled at him. The situation brought him back to only a week or so ago, when Cody had decided to escalate by poking his back to garner a response. Damian deemed that he would rather not have any injuries aggravated, finally turning his head back as Cody whispered through his teeth. If you fight someone, I think I should know first. I can spread the word, you know? Tell everyone that you beat up a... He paused, seemingly racking his brain for someone Damian could have possibly had an altercation with. A cop? Not that I think you would do that, obviously. I mean, probably. Damian gave him a blank look as Cody raised an eyebrow. He had a stupid expression on his face, as if he were waiting for confirmation. Damian was pretty sure he should be, at the very least, mildly offended that Cody was implying he was some sort of criminal, but he learned to ignore whatever new idiotic thing came out of his mouth as of late. It was even harder to be offended as he observed the dampness to Cody's hair and clothing, which confused him. It wasn't as if the school had a pool. I'm just trying to help out, or is it a secret or something? My mom made me watch this really old movie about a club where people beat each other up. Are you in one of those? I heard the Red Hood runs one in Crime Alley. No, Damian answered, before he could stop himself. His leg burned in pain, but he noted something that had been weighing on the back of his mind. His words didn't seem to hurt so much during the day. Not to a dramatic degree, but it was notable if he considered the pain he'd felt when yelling at Steph a week before. Okay, Cody scratched at his neck. Don't tell me then, but I'm going to figure it out. Damian rolled his eyes before hearing the telltale clacking of Mrs. Briggs' pumps approaching. He glanced over to her, having to squint as she was once again dressed much too vibrantly for his tastes. Her nails were bright purple, and she had her braids tied up, making it very easy to observe the gold chunky necklace set primly upon her neck. Boys, what are we talking about? She asked, a frown on her face as she glanced between them. I don't want to have to separate you two, but if we're having problems... We're not having any problems. Damian just won't tell me his secret. Cody cut in, and he groaned internally as Mrs. Briggs' eyes widened as she fixed her attention back on Damian. Secret? Well, I don't know it yet, but I'm trying to figure it out. It's fine, though. We're all good. She bit at her lip as she hummed, staring much too intently at Damian's face. He huffed, turning his head so she would finally stop. Let's be nicer to each other. I don't want you spending another lunch in the office. We do not antagonize our classmates. Cody nodded diligently, but Damian noted he had crossed his fingers under the desk. He had doubts that his peer even knew what antagonizing meant. Okay. Amazing. Let's get back to reading. You need to be on chapter 2 by next week. We're so close to the end of the day. Let's power through. The book, The Giver, had been cast aside to a forgotten corner of Cody's cramped desk. It already seemed worn, a suspicious warping to it that Damian deemed to likely be from whatever had doused Cody earlier. This was an observation confirmed from glancing at the floor, where a puddle had formed under Cody's backpack. Oh, that? Cody pointed to the book as Damian raised his eyebrow. It was so crazy. I was filling up my water bottle, and I swear the pipe freaked out on me. I got splashed like crazy, and now all my stuff is ruined. So my mom got really mad when I called her. He hadn't been looking for an explanation, as he truly didn't care much, but Damian kept his eyes trained on the book. If things were already acting up with the city's electricity, then why would the water be safe? It could, of course, be a coincidence, but he had been too single-minded lately. Paranoia had long ago set in. He just hadn't acknowledged it till now. 10 minutes passed, and the bell rang as it always did, resulting in the mass exodus of the classroom. Damian fell behind the pack, sighing internally as he stepped into the hallway. It was a difficult task to dodge the many children barreling through the halls. An 8th grader shoved his friend into a row of lockers, nearly crashing into Damian with boisterous laughter. He glared at them before continuing, staying close to the wall as he finally reached the staircase. It was emptier than the crowded halls had been, and it was an unremarkable journey to Miss Liesel's room. He ended his day with her teaching on Fridays, a reward for a week of school-induced misery. Damian only really enjoyed her class, a sentiment he had no intentions of sharing. As he walked through the metal door leading to the art classroom, his head perked up at a loud and familiar noise. He turned to look toward it, and couldn't help the slight joy tugging at him as he observed a large black-and-white dog, wagging its tail back and forth. "It's been about 3 months, I'd say. He's picking up fast." Dr. Dahlman was holding onto the dog's leash, smiling brightly as Miss Liesel was crouched in front of him, rubbing the dog's ears. "I was planning to bring him in officially next week, but I had to pick up some papers before I left. Zahir said he didn't care, thank God. I couldn't leave him in my car." "He's so sweet," Miss Liesel cooed, continuing to pet the dog's clearly soft fur, scratching his head and cheeks. "He must take after you." "Well," Dr. Dahlman sputtered out, before cutting himself off as he noticed Damian having entered the classroom. "Hey, Damian!" Miss Liesel raised her head, an even sunnier expression appearing on her face. "My favorite student! Am I allowed to say that?" She glanced at Dr. Dahlman, who shook his head ever so minutely. "Well, it's fine. Not like it was much of a secret." Dr. Dahlman cleared his throat. "I had to bring Chewie in while I grabbed my papers. I know I said you'd see him next week, but I didn't think an early meeting would hurt anyone." Chewie's tongue hung out of his mouth, and his tail whipped back and forth, thwacking into Dr. Dahlman's leg every so often. He seemed to be a Bernese mountain dog, a respectable breed, obvious from his cheerful face and large frame. Damian figured he must be being trained as a therapy dog. The process seemed to be coming along nicely, as Chewie didn't try to jump on him as Titus might have. "You can pet him if you'd like," the counselor supplied, loosening his grip on the leash as Miss Liesel stood, brushing off her dress. "He could always use more socialization." Damian decided not to question why Dr. Dahlman had chosen to visit his art teacher. He approached Chewie, crouching down to simply stare at him. Chewie's tail still wagged fiercely, enough that he was almost surprised the beast hadn't flown off. He raised his hand and began stroking his fur, scratching at his chin and petting his fluffy body. His mouth tugged upward as he sat with Chewie. Miss Liesel and Dr. Dahlman hovered awkwardly above him, glancing at one another as they watched the scene before them. "Do you prefer dogs or cats?" Miss Liesel asked suddenly, looking between Damian and Dr. Dahlman. "Personally, I like them equally. I have a cat at home. Her name is Farah. She likes to bite my legs." She hiked up her skirt to just above her calves as she spoke, showing off bandages and faded scars. "I call them my battle scars." "I'm more of a dog person myself," Dr. Dahlman replied slowly, his eyebrows raised and eyes glinting in the slightest bit of amusement as he stared at Miss Liesel. "Say, Damian, Julie still has your painting. We were wondering if you would like to take it home soon. It seemed pretty personal." He let the idea play about in his head. He didn't need his family to see it, as such a conversation would bring unwanted scrutiny. So the bigger issue was getting it home. While Alfred picked him up, he would surely be curious to observe the painting. It seemed Tim had gone and run his mouth about the painting. "Here, I'll wrap it up for you," Miss Liesel said as she hurried over to her desk, searching around for something to cover his painting. "We can't have it getting damaged." Dr. Dahlman turned his attention back to Damian, who still had his hands in Chewie's fur. He was warm and smelled clean, his fur having clearly been diligently brushed through. He was sitting beside him, and Damian found some solace in his presence. "What are your weekend plans?" Dr. Dahlman asked conversationally, leaning against a table casually. Damian glanced at him, not knowing what to say. "Richard," he finally answered, pain shooting up his calf. Dr. Dahlman looked surprised, before quickly changing his expression. He hid his face in Chewy's fur, as Dr. Dahlman nodded with a wide smile. The dog whined slightly, but was placated as Damian scratched along his spine. "He's around? That's great to hear. I'm glad you have him." That was an odd way to put their relationship, but before Damian could consider his words more deeply, a large canvas covered with a white sheet was thrust toward him. "Here you go." Miss Liesel beamed down at him, hands carefully clutching what seemed to be his painting. "I varnished it before the show, so it should be fine to transport. Just be really careful taking it home." He took it gingerly, standing up finally, and Dr. Dahlman let out a sigh. "Well, I should get going now. Class starts soon, and I have a campsite to get to." That explained why he was leaving early, and perhaps the bringing of the dog. He likely was planning to camp with Chewy, a thought that made Damian grow very faintly fonder of the counselor. "Bye, Julie. Bye, Damian. I'll see you next week." Damian put a hand to his chin, as he deliberated where his painting would be best hidden. Alfred hadn't commented on its appearance in the car when he picked up Damian, merely glancing at it as Damian climbed into his seat and rested it at his feet. The butler was never one to push. He appreciated that to a degree, and yet, lately, he's begun feeling less assured by this trait. Car rides were silent, and he knew this was typical, even before the curse. But somehow it felt disconcerting all of a sudden. His bedroom was his prison and sanctuary in some ways, and tonight it would relate more to the latter, as he finally decided on stuffing the painting away under his bed and praying no one had reason to look under it. Damian pushed it under carefully. He was still proud of his work, and did not dare to do anything that might harm the careful varnishing. He heard a knock on his door and scrambled up. He sidestepped his backpack as he pulled the handle, and Dick stood in the doorway with a bright smile. "Hey, patrol is in a second. Head down with me." Dick had his hands shoved in his pockets as they walked off, as if there was nothing odd about the situation. Usually, he'd be goading Damian into talking by now. This did not occur, and that struck him as being odd. He kept glancing back at Damian, his lips pursed and expression strained. He wasn't staying at the manor. His room remained empty. It seemed his fight with father from before had stretched on. He mentioned to Damian in passing that he was staying at one of his safe houses in the city. Damian wasn't quite sure which one he was referring to, but, of course, he was not in a position to ask. They changed quickly in the locker room, and Damian was grateful that there were changing stalls at that moment. "I need to talk with Alfred about something, so I'll come in after," Dick said, before walking toward the medbay. Damian frowned slightly as his brother left his side, before quickly shaking the feeling away as he headed toward the cave. He was almost there as he heard voices. His name was mentioned, and he refrained from entering, listening in from the doorway. "Keep an eye on him. I am concerned. He's been quiet." Bruce's voice was low, as if he didn't want to be heard. It was like what he was saying was somehow scandalous. "Is that why you had Timmy call in the big guns?" Jason's voice cut in. He sounded annoyed, and Damian wondered if it was because he had been forced to patrol with him that night. "Partly. There's still a case, but his well-being comes first." "And you couldn't talk to him yourself?" Bruce sighed. "I don't know how. I'm afraid that if I say something wrong, he'll only grow more upset. Just please try." "I will, obviously, but you'd better say something soon. Go over the conversation with Alfred at the very least. But if the kid needs emotional support, it sure as hell ain't coming from me. That's supposed to be your job." "I will. Thank you." "Why isn't old Wing doing this, though? I can't say he's not the better choice. Even Cass would be better." "I just need to catch him up tonight. After this, he'll be with Robin. Cass is working on the fire still. She's investigating with Tim. There might be some leads we're missing." Damian felt his stomach lurch as he confirmed they were talking about him. They spoke as if he were some pathetic child who needed hand-holding and gentle words. As if Damian were not trained by assassins. As if he were not capable of being enough. Because he was, wasn't he? Enough, that is? He completed tasks with ease, and that should be enough. He didn't understand what could not be enough about that. Doing what was asked of him had always meant success. Why had that changed? He had felt a sense of failure when he heard his father say he'd been quiet. Surely he should have wanted them to notice. Yet, why did it feel so shameful for them to have finally done so? It had only been about 2 weeks. He could do more, figure out more, have something more to offer than a page in an old book. His head hurt, and he wondered absent-mindedly if it was due to his condition. Dysentery was a term without definition in any dictionary, which of course made sense. The wording in the book had been clinical. Persistent headaches, fatigue, predisposition to bruising, suppressed appetite, and in some cases, emesis. Nearly all of the symptoms he had already displayed. And the description of the substance that would expel from his body was the same as what had leaked out of his nose the day before. He was curious if it would only occur when he was actively bleeding, but decided that testing that through self-injury was out of the question. There are too many ways that may go wrong, as bandages were much harder to keep discreet. The sound of footsteps approaching took him back to reality, and he turned around to see Steph quickly approaching.
"Oh, hey, Dames!"
She was as energetic as usual, her mask not yet pulled up, and her hair hanging limply against her back. Long hair seemed like a poor choice for vigilante work, but she didn't listen much when Damian gave his thoughts on the matter.
"Why are you just standing there? I thought you'd be excited to be back at it."
When he didn't respond, merely staring, she smiled awkwardly before looking toward the doorway.
"Okay, then. Well, I'm just gonna step around you."
He watched her go before sighing to himself and following after her. If she told Father and Jason that he was standing outside the room, it would become very apparent that he had been listening in on them. The cave was illuminated by the bright computer screen, once again showing the map of blackouts. Red blinked rhythmically in a nearly soothing pattern. His father had turned his attention to the screen, Jason standing a few feet away with his arms crossed. Steph was near the door, and she looked back at Damian as he entered, a look of relief on her face.
"Oh, thank God. It was getting a little stuffy,"
she whispered, somehow loudly, causing Jason to glare at her.
"I call dibs on going to that place,"
she said while pointing towards the dot located very near to where Damian and Tim had gone to Batburger.
"I'm assigning patrol routes tonight. You're over here tonight. Dick and I will be close."
He gestured towards Old Gotham, decidedly on the opposite side of the city from where Steph had been angling to go.
"Oh, come on! Why am I the only one alone? That's so boring."
"It's just for tonight."
Before she could interrupt once more, Dick finally entered. He'd already put his mask on, a tense look on his face as he looked again at Damian. He wondered what he might have spoken with Alfred about.
"All good?"
he asked, glancing around the group.
"Yep,"
Jason said, popping the P, as he started walking towards the garage.
"Hurry up, kid."
Damian held back a retort as he slowly turned to follow, well aware that he was the kid in question. That didn't stop Steph from snorting as Damian stared at the floor, considering all the ways he could take the brakes off Jason's motorcycle.
"So,"
Damian lifted his head from the would-be robber he'd apprehended. Park Row, more often called Crime Alley, was usually solely Jason's territory. It wasn't as if Father was particularly eager to patrol there himself, so usually Red Hood was left to his own devices.
"Just lay it on me. What's up?"
To this, Damian would have no answer, even with his voice being his own. So he just stared at his brother, who was fidgeting with his holster, unhooking and rehooking it. Jason sighed, shaking his head.
"Oh my God, where's Dickie when you need him?"
he muttered, grappling up onto a rooftop with ease. Damian followed, touching down lightly. The smell of burning incense was thick in the air. Jason was hunched over something, and Damian stepped toward him to get a better look. It appeared to be a pile of what used to be herbs, with ash all around. He had a pit in his stomach, his hands clenching tightly around his grappling hook.
Huh. Is this some kind of religious thing? It's obviously purposeful anyway.
Jason wafted the smoke towards his face, having taken off his helmet.
It kind of smells like rosemary? Any ideas what this could be about?
Damian shook his head, thankful that at least it was truthful. He hadn't a clue why there might be incense being burned on a random rooftop. While he had a gut feeling it had something to do with Melina, he still had zero idea about her plans. In fact, for all he knew, she had already left, a thought he hadn't let himself consider before. But the blackouts, fire, and billboard all pointed to her involvement, what with their potentially magical relation. Jason was eyeing him funny, finally standing up. He ignored the pile of smoldering herbs in favor of squinting at Damian. He shifted uncomfortably on his feet, suddenly very aware of himself.
Seriously, you've been, quiet. Is, something up?
Damian curled his lip in distaste.
No.
A word that shouldn't have hurt so much to say, but had nearly felt like it had been forced out of him, a venomous spittle exiting his throat. His stomach ached painfully, and he crouched down in front of the herbs to hide his pain. A dull ache throbbed all over him, one he had become accustomed to, that didn't make it hurt any less. Jason didn't seem to believe him much. He huffed, once again playing with his holster.
Look, if anything's wrong, you can just tell me. Is there someone messing with you? 'Cause I'll talk to them if you need me to. I'll take care of it.
It almost sounded like he was offering to kill someone for him, which Damian knew wasn't the case in this instance, as he was talking about hypothetical children. His face flushed with embarrassment as he kept his gaze on the ground. For Jason to not only think he had let the actions of children affect him, but actually cause him to change his behavior, was one of the more shameful insinuations he'd been accused of.
All right.
Jason put his helmet back on.
What about your arm? Can I take a look at it? I want to make sure...
The crackle of comms interrupted that thought, and Father's voice cut in.
Redwood, Robin, have you two found anything yet?
Not really, just... Jason angled his head down to the pile of now fully burnt herbs, seemingly looking at them. It was difficult to tell as Jason's helmet was rather large.
We found this weird burning pile of herbs on top of this roof, near where the power surge was. We did too,
Dick said.
Don't tell me there's another cult that popped up.
Steph groaned over the comm.
Don't put that in the air. I didn't find anything weird, but...
We're going to keep patrolling, everyone. Keep an eye out for anything else that might be suspicious,
Bruce replied.
I'll do some research,
Barbara said. Damian hadn't even realized she was online that night. He figured she'd been dealing with Tim and Cass, who were on another channel. He was curious if their investigation was any success, but he had some doubts.
Let's keep looking,
Jason said suddenly, walking away towards the edge of the roof, already with his grapple out. Damian scrambled to follow him, but not before taking some of the ashes and placing them in a small vial in his belt. He just hoped it wouldn't break. Damian stared up at the ceiling of his room, lost in his thoughts. Alfred the cat was nestled into his side, soft enough that Damian felt no pain when he touched him. It was hard to sleep, as no matter where he rested, pain followed. He was debating whether to try sleeping on his side, when a quiet knock rapped on his door. He sat up, staring at the doorway where someone must have stood. Throwing his feet over the side of the bed, he went to open the door. His father stood there in an uncomfortable silence, looking down at him tiredly. It was late, and Damian had been told to go to bed nearly an hour before, while Jason had told him and Dick everything they had seen on patrol. He'd handed the vial to Jason wordlessly, who had taken it with a quiet thanks. Father was wearing a simple black long-sleeved shirt and dark pants, having finally changed out of his suit. In some ways, Damian was more familiar with the mask he donned then the face behind it. And so he simply stared at him, taking in every detail of his face with quiet surprise.
You've been quiet. More than usual.
Damian looked up sharply, feeling an eerie sense of familiarity with the one-sided conversation he'd had with Jason earlier. He tapped his fingers against his arm, stalling.
I'm not asking for an explanation if you don't want to give one. I need to know if you're okay. Are you okay?
Fine. His voice was strained. Even he knew that. His wince was nearly imperceptible as pain bloomed on his arm, but his father had never been one to ignore the finer details. Bruce's brow furrowed.
Fine isn't enough. If you're hurt, if something's happening, you can tell me.
Damian's jaw tightened. He shifted his weight, eyes dropping once more. He nodded sharply. Father studied him with a hard gaze, one that made him want to squirm. He stepped closer, kneeling to be level with Damian. Bruce's voice was gentle but unflinching.
You don't have to say anything. If nothing's wrong, I'll believe you, but...
He paused, sighing quietly.
Just tell someone if it isn't, all right?
Damian swallowed hard, his throat burning, but he didn't move. He just clenched his fists and looked away. Bruce rested a hand lightly in the air, as if he were about to ghost it over Damian's shoulder, before letting it fall limply to his side. Damian didn't answer. His lips parted as if he might try, but then closed again. He only gave a small and short nod. This seemed to be enough. Bruce stood up, pulling away like he always did, letting a hand rest on the doorframe.
Good night.
Damian watched him walk away, before letting the door close with a quiet click. He took a step back, and once more plunged into the sort of isolation that he never thought possible. For as large as his family was, he still felt impossibly small as he sat on his bed, pulling his cat nearer to him. Tears dropped down his face, and it was then that he realized he had begun to cry. He didn't have it in him to care, letting them wash over him as more joined. It was the only gift he would grant himself, tears turning to sobs as his face burned as his bruises did. He hugged Alfred the cat tighter, who mewed softly, and he curled up on himself, a misery setting over him. He would have thought he'd be grateful to some degree that his family had begun noticing a change, and yet it didn't feel very good at all. Damian was burdening them with things of his own doing. Dick had only come because Tim had called him, not through a real desire to see Damian. He had been cared for like a houseplant, watered when necessary, but never more often. He was ashamed that they thought him weak enough to need emotional support of all things. All he needed was his curse lifted, yet somehow even that felt like too much to ask. And that is the end of Chapter 11. Author's notes. Progress, but sad. Perhaps that might be the synopsis for this one. Ramping up and all that good stuff. Bruce, so close, aren't we? Need to push it a bit more, though, to be honest. Cody continues to be a mild nuisance, like a buzzing fly in Damian's ear. Damian's favorite teacher duo is at it again. Kind of feels like a crossover comic event to write, lol. And the painting returns home. I did not forget about its saddening existence. Too bad for Damian. I honestly don't have that much to say this time around. Thank you for the continued support. I can't say it enough times. Have a beautiful day/night. And reader's notes from me. Sorry if this one sounded off. I definitely stutter a lot with this one. My voice is just not working with me today. I think I'm fighting a little bit of selective mutism right now, so that's not great. But I needed to record this today or else I wouldn't edit it, because I have an opportunity to sit down at my school and edit tomorrow. So I just need to pump this out today. This one's going to be updated in 2 weeks. And then there's going to be a month break because of scheduling issues with a different fic, but after that, it should return to a normal schedule. All right, so thank you guys for listening, and bye!